Hello interwebs, and welcome back to another Nerdventure where we will be continuing our search for excellence in visual storytelling today after our extended break. Apologies first off for being away for so long from all of you fine folks. My time management skills are not what they would be in an ideal world, but I am back today having purged a lot of my collection of hardcovers and omnibus, which you might have seen in my last video, and replaced a lot of things with trade paperbacks and smaller, easier collections to maintain. I'm actually finding that it is letting me read a lot more and a bigger variety of things. So recently I've been reading a lot more things that I would like to share with you guys, and I have some stuff on the back burner, I have some stuff I'm reading right now, and I think it will be a great time for the channel moving forward, where I can balance my life and the channel and everything a little bit more and be able to deliver to you guys some hopefully really cool content. Obviously today you can see I've changed up the studio space a little bit. I'm going to be trying to film in this corner over here away from the bookshelf because the bookshelf is a big mess and is not really suitable for being filmed at this point just because it's not cohesive anymore at all. It's just filled with random things. And I thought it would be fun to set up in this other corner, try to display some of the art stuff that I have, and show you some books. Like this right here, the Mobius Library World of Edena. If you've been with the channel for any amount of time, you know that I am a big Mobius head. I have a number of his books. I had more of his stuff when it was just collected in the simple trade paperback editions that Epic Comics and Marvel were doing from the 80s into, I think, the early 90s. There's also some nice stuff that Graffiti Designs has done. There's been a wide variety of Mobius collections. Unfortunately, many of them have been relatively incomplete, or only publishing parts of things, or translated in various strange ways and collected backwards or out of order. It's been a pain in the ass to collect. Finally, Dark Horse has come to us with the Mobius Library Set of books, which they are putting out. It's a little bit hard to see exactly what they're doing at the moment because they aren't exactly quick with the publishing. They only put this book out last year in 2016. They're slated to put one book out this year in 2017, which is an art book related to Edena. And then they're slated in 2018 to put out the 3-volume set of Inside Mobius, which is sort of like an autobiographical sketch, fantasy, crazy set of books which Mobius did, kind of connecting all of the different Mobius characters and the worlds that he's drawn with his own life. So, suffice it to say, the series is not moving quickly, and it also is not looking like it's going to be necessarily a definitive thing of everything that Mobius worked on. Mostly it's just going to be things that Mobius was particularly involved in the writing and creation as well as the art of. At least that's what it seems like to me right now. Things like the Incal, Mad Woman of the Sacred Heart, Eyes of the Cat, stuff like that, which is collaborative works with Jodorowsky, Alejandro Jodorowsky, all of those books at least. Looks like the rights to those are probably staying with Humanoids, which is a French publishing group that Mobius helped found in the 70s. So I'm not exactly sure what Dark Horse would be able to or not able to do with that kind of stuff, but there is some great just Mobius, straight up Mobius stuff. The Airtight Garage is one that comes to mind. This particular story cycle, the Edena cycle, as well as a number of other kind of short and interesting little books. But today we're going to be talking about this particular edition, The World of Edena, published by Dark Horse in 2016. This is a fabulous collection of stories, and definitely something that I truly believe that anybody that's interested in graphic literature and mind-expanding storytelling should add to their collection. This particular book is an oversized European size, graphic album size, how many different sizes can I tell you what it is, book, which means that it is taller and wider than a normal American trade paperback collection. It's about the same, I believe, height as an oversized hardcover, like a deluxe American hardcover, but it is wider because European graphic albums are produced at a wider format than American comic books. This book collects 6 sort of if you count the first story, Repairs, but 5 main pieces of the Edena cycle, which is something that Mobius was working on for nearly 2 decades, starting in 1983, so the very beginning of the 80s, and then finishing up, I believe, the last chapter in this was 1999 up through 2001 or so. So roughly 20 years of work went into this, and it's kind of the pinnacle of his particular take on the evolution of humans, the philosophy that Mobius tries to express through the way he lived his life, which was very much interested in like vegetarian diets, fruit-based diets. I believe he was vegan for a long time, raw foods, spiritual living, naturalistic living. It takes a lot of these ideas that Mobius had as a person and condenses them into this, well, condenses is the wrong word because this is quite sprawling, but packages them all into this multi-chapter cycle of a story of these two people, Stel and Atan, who start out as characters who are taken up in this system of modern society, of repressed hormones, of repressed genetic patterns. Everything is kind of homogenized and put the same in both of them. It takes them on this wild journey, discovering who they really are, opening up their true selves, their relationship with each other. It's a massive undertaking, and like I said, through 20 years, you probably would expect it to be. What's particularly interesting, I think, is that it didn't start out necessarily with that goal in mind. This book actually was published, like I said, the very first book of this, which was called Upon a Star in English when it was translated, was drawn and published in 1983 for an automobile company. I believe the company is Citroe with an umlaut N, so Citroën, a French automobile company, which basically contracted Mobius to produce a house advertisement using some of their cars. He was already known at that point. This is 1983, so he would have published the first volume of the In-Call by that point and would have been working on the In-Call with Jodorowsky from 1981 to about 88. So this was kind of the peak of his powers. I really think the kind of 81 to 85 era was just an amazing time for Mobius. And this car company got in touch with him, asked him to produce a house ad, which originally he was just going to write and lay out and somebody else was going to finish. It talks about it in this book. But he got to the point of putting it together, and he just made an amazing story. It all flowed out of him, and he produced, he said very quickly, sort of in a span of one sitting, what would become Upon a Star, the first collection, or the first chapter in this book. And for me, personally, I think that Upon a Star might be the strongest part of this book. It is phenomenally interesting. So how to talk about this book without spoiling it? It's going to be tough. I will try to say as little as possible, but if you really want to go in absolutely blind, you might want to do that first before listening to this review, because I can tell you right now, you're probably going to enjoy it. I think it's a fantastic book. But for those of you who want to continue and get an idea of what's going on, let us proceed. Upon a Star, like I said, this advertisement for an automobile, it does have the automobile in it briefly, but that's sort of a secondary portion of what the story is. It gets our two characters, Stel and Atan, into this place in the universe where they are then transported to a paradise world of Edena, which is where the majority of the story takes place. And then over the next 4 chapters of this Edena cycle, we see them develop themselves into 2 different characters. At the beginning, it's almost difficult to tell them apart because they basically look identical and sort of genderless. Well, we see them develop into these 2 different characters. They become entangled together. There's a lot of, like I said, the budding sexuality and understanding gender between the 2 of them because they are experiencing this naturalistic life that they were cut off from before, and it makes them express themselves in different ways that they were unfamiliar with. And then ultimately they are pulled apart, and most of the middle to end of this book is about Stel trying to find Atan, who eventually goes by Atana, as they are pulled apart, and he is thrust into crazy situations, and she is thrust into crazy situations. There's a lot of remnants of something like the In-Call in this. There's kind of this society gone out of control on Edena, which Atana becomes a kind of savior for eventually. Meanwhile, Stell is trapped out in the wilderness, and it has a lot of the Mobian ideas about the desert and shamanism going on with some of the characters that are going on there. Again, not to get too particularly spoilery. With the two of them going through these separate journeys, they're trying to come together, and there's always something that's keeping them apart. And then, ultimately, the final chapter, which takes place a number of years, Mobius drew it a number of years after the rest of these. The last chapter, which is called Sra, is kind of a departure from the other ones. I think, for me, it was an interesting read. You have to go into the end of this book with a very open mind, because it starts getting into dream logic and dream projections and ideas about what you've seen in the story, which are real or not, or who the people are, or what they represent, and it becomes... You just have to turn off your analysis filter and experience it in sort of a dream state, which is what Mobius talks about. He said it was hardest for him to finish this last chapter of the book because it goes beyond what he was doing before into this kind of realm of strange, free-flowing dream ideas. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to be the strongest finish for everyone. If that sounds like something that is not interesting to you, then by all means, you could just read kind of the first part of this, and I think you would enjoy it, especially Upon a Star. The first story is fantastic. The Gardens of Edena, the second story, the Goddess, Stell, and Sra is sort of the arc of it all. It does get progressively stranger and odder and more loosely associated as it goes on, and I think that is absolutely meant to be the case, because by the time Mobius was finishing this, between 1999 and 2001, he was working on stuff like 40 Days in Desert B, which is a wordless, entirely visual, shamanistic desert dreamscape storytelling. It's very out there. It's amazingly drawn, but it's very out there, and that's kind of where his mind goes to at the end of this. The beginning of this book is a little more grounded. It has a little bit more of a story and an arc to kind of catch on and follow with. And when you get to the end, you just have to embrace the chaos of what is going on. Especially, I don't know, I'm somebody who has very strange dreams. Like, I wake up remembering odd things and kind of... they're always trippy and weird, and I can usually relate them back to some aspect of my life. And so it was kind of nice, actually, to see what Mobius did with the end of this, because it very much feels like what you read through with the rest of the characters is a dream that you're waking up from, and then you have to put together the pieces of... why was this dream occurring? Again, that's not very specific, but it is where you have to go mentally to be able to accept the end of this book. It does kind of get weird. The writing, I think, is pretty good. Like I said, much more straightforward at the beginning of the book, and then getting stranger and stranger. It seems as Mobius went, he kind of pulled influence from Jodorowsky, where if you read the Inkal and stuff like that, he's kind of throwing out these terms and ideas without explaining anything to you, and the end of the book feels a lot more like that, whereas the beginning of the book feels like not stock sci-fi, because it's definitely not, but it can kind of be understood in terms that are more straightforward science fiction and fantasy terminology. The writing is good, but in my opinion, the writing sort of just serves to push forward these greater ideas about naturalistic living that Mobius is having, and it's really the art that shines through in this book. Artistically, Mobius is on fire through most of this book, especially the beginnings. He talks about, specifically when he was drawing this, there's lots of interviews with him peppered throughout this book, that he went for a style which is very minimalist in its line work. It's not overdone with crosshatches and extra lines and adding detail through that, and it's meant to convey the most amount of emotion, movement, and storytelling through the fewest number of lines. And let me tell you, his line work is astonishing. It's not... how can I say this? Because to say it's not tight, I think, is unfair, because it is amazingly strong in the way that it characterizes itself, but it's not like you can sort of see little wobbles and things like that. Like, his line work is not the kind of, like, tight, straight lines that some modern artists are more tied to. It is more of like a free-flowing kind of single-line art style, but his particular way of drafting people and movement and animals and ideas and things that don't exist in the universe, just creating these things that are completely out of his imagination, it gives them such a sense of tactility and realism, if that makes sense. Like, you feel like you know what these things would feel like, or what you know, looking at them would be like in real life. The way he draws his lines is simply amazing. I do think that the art, you know, it takes place, the book takes place, was published over about 18 years, or however I was saying. It changes over the course of it. The beginning, to me, the first 2 chapters are far and away my favorite. Upon a Star and the Gardens of Eden, I think, are just amazing. It is the exact time period that I like from Mobius. They are done for him, you know, penciled, inked, and then colored by him, I believe. And then after that, it gets a little bit washier. The next 2 ones, The Goddess and Stell, they still look nice, but the coloring is a little bit washed and faded. I'll show you some of what I'm talking about. It feels like the coloring is a little grainier, and it doesn't necessarily feel as crisp as some of the earlier stories. And then the last book, by the time he was doing Sra, I'm fairly certain that this was done maybe partially digitally, like on a Cintiq or something like that, because I know Mobius started to use digital tools, you know, as they became available. I don't know particularly for this story, but it looks to me and has like much more of a feel of the later Mobius stuff, which has, like I said, looks more of computerized, or at least having the color done at the very least by some type of digital coloring. But regardless of the chapter, it all still looks really good. The beginning, I think, is the strongest in terms of the science fiction designs, the stuff that he's doing with the pyramid, the transportation device, which gets the 2 characters to Edena, is just incredible and awesome. It's on an epic scale. When you see the ships piled up around the pyramid and you see the pyramid itself, it just looks so amazing. And then as you go on into the Gardens of Eden, you kind of get into this lush paradise vibe to it. Moving forward from Eden, when you get into the goddess part, you get into the city and the technological kind of bastardized technology that people have set up on Edena. That has a really interesting design to it. You know, Mobius is great at designing things, like he worked on the Fifth Element, and you can kind of see that in a lot of his designs here. The Goddess probably has the most of those kind of Mobian design things, breaking away from traditional science fiction archetypes into a much more looser and interesting visual style. And Stell, that next chapter, has a lot of really cool desert kind of stuff, a lot of really interesting stuff. You know, Mobius spent a lot of his childhood in Mexico, and it has a lot of influence from the emptiness of the desert and the wandering, the shamanistic kind of wandering aspects of the desert. It's really quite nice. And then finally, Sra, which finishes it all up, sort of balances all of those things, because it is kind of an amalgamation, this dream logic look at all of the different things that have happened in the world. So it's a very artistically diverse book. It sort of shows you these 5 different faces that Mobius had, but then it all, ultimately, you can definitely tell that it's under the umbrella of one person. So in that sense, if you're looking to experience kind of all of the eras of Mobius from 1980 to 1999 and see where he was in his life and what he was doing, this is a really cool collection because of that. The reproduction of the art and the actual quality of the collection is really nice. The pages all look great. The lines and the scanning and everything, it looks really, really nice. You know, Dark Horse did a great job with all of the design work, and I'm excited to get their Art of Edena book, because I think that will only improve what we already have here. It's really just a lovely package overall that they've been able to deliver with the World of Edena, because Mobius did such an amazing job of creating, like I said, this feeling that this world is lived in and tactile and believable, that it really comes to life in this collection. So taking into account everything that I've gushed and said about this book, I really do think that it's something that if you are interested in understanding Mobius more as a creator, this is a really good key to unlocking a little bit more of who he is, because of the fact that he is scripting, creating this world, and doing it all himself without another person like Jodorowsky scripting and giving him those kind of nudges and movements. You really get to see the things that he deems to be important. This idea of getting away from the artifice of society and technology and living in a more naturalized state is sort of the overarching theme. But you really get to see him tackle that in a lot of different ways in this book. I think there are some people that will not enjoy this book, for sure. If you are not necessarily feeling open to, like I said, interpreting dream logics and having this idea of letting yourself flourish in the natural world. I mean, I hate being outside, okay? I'm like a fat indoorsy couch guy. But if you are willing to let your mind go to these places of understanding, I think that this is a really cool book. But I really thoroughly believe that if you are not kind of ready to follow Mobius on this journey, you will probably find a lot of it either total gibberish, pretentious, or just absolutely meaningless. It depends on the kind of reader you are. It's not going to be for everybody. But if you are interested in Mobius, if you've seen his art, and you want to get to know a little bit more about the man behind the art, I think this book probably most captures his identity and puts it into pages of graphic storytelling, which is kind of an amazing feat that as a person he was able to express the unexpressible in just lines and colors. It's really quite remarkable that he created all of these things that didn't exist, an entire universe, concepts that are totally beyond and hard to talk about, and he condenses it down into a storytelling formula that really works. It's a winner on every front for me. I think it's the right price. This is a $50 book, and you can have it for much less than that on Amazon or in stock trades or anywhere that fine books are sold. And as something that Dark Horse is promising to continue supporting, this line of Mobian comic books, the Mobius Library, I think it's an excellent first entry. I would love to see Airtight Garage put into this. I would love to see Arzak put into this. There's a lot more things that I would like to see the Mobius Library collect, but they did, I think, a very smart thing with releasing this first, because it gives you, I think, the most intimate glimpse into who this guy is. Possibly Inside Mobius gives you a more intimate glimpse, but that book, from the brief bits that I've seen and read of it, looks like it's a lot more difficult to digest for somebody who doesn't know Mobius very, very closely, who hasn't followed his characters and his world. It seems like that book might be a more difficult place to start. So I think this is an excellent starting place for figuring out who Mobius is, why he's important, what he's all about as a person, and as a creator of graphic storytelling. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be making more in the future, obviously, on a variety of different things that I'm working on, and I will see you guys soon in the comments and in the next video. Thank you so much. Have a great one.